Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie również.
Welcome. This afternoon, Martyna introduced my presentation, and some of you might hope that I will present a very in-depth analysis of the legal framework, but we only have 20 minutes, so I want to encourage you to discuss about children's rights in the digital world, and the responsibility of grown-ups. So, a child's perspective. We should be curious about it. We have to be curious about it, and we have to follow our heart, but also our mind. Following our heart means that we want the world of good for our children, but we should also follow our reason, our mind, because children will shape our future. And when we speak about future, we should always remember about the digital revolution that is currently underway. So children's rights are very important from the point of view of children's perspective. When we heard from Eva and Martyna, they spoke about very serious and very dangerous spheres of young people's lives. And they have the right for us to be serious about them, to be serious about children's perspective. I'm so happy so many educators and so many parents are here with us, because we all have the right to know what dangers there are for the young people and for children. I will speak about a number of documents. On one hand, about EU strategy on the rights of the child, and also a European strategy for better internet for children and children's right in digital environment strategy. So these documents encompass the period 2016-2021, and right now a debate is underway in order to shape the strategy for the next period. The strategy for better internet has a history of over a dozen years, and what we spoke of 10 years ago is no longer relevant sometimes. So we need to discuss it, we need to process it, because 8, 9, 10 years is really a different era in the world of internet. So we are currently embarking on a debate about the future shape of these strategies. We've been speaking about children's rights for many years now, but in the key areas that I have listed on the slide, we still need to be very engaged. We still need to engage children more in public life. We should ask their opinion. We should take them into consideration when making decisions. We need to be very inclusive, give children equal rights in social and economic aspects. And what children find most painful and stressful are threats of harm, violence, bullying, and do not see a reaction from a grown-up world into the reaction to the problems that they are facing online and the abuse they are facing online. So we need to speak about counteracting violence, but also prosecuting violence. The pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, was the period when we were able to listen to some excellent lectures. Professor Jacek Pyżalski was the person I encountered during that time. I listened to his excellent lecture, and when we ask a question, we get frustrated because we get no response from children. But in order for us to improve the situation, we just have to wait a while longer. So we ask a question and wait for a few seconds. And we may have a wonderful reaction, because people who are passive might become active, engaged, and involved. And when we think about processes that take place in schools and when children, we do not really ask the questions often enough. So not only do we not wait for answers for a long enough time, but we sometimes never ask the questions. So I wanted to give you two examples
aktywności na czacie, który u nas naprawdę aż
I also present 3 points in order to make you active on the chat. So first thing, cameras during online classes, on or off?
I pytanie do Państwa.
And a question to you. In your school, did you really discuss this with pupils, whether they want the cameras to be on or off and when? Did you speak about needs of your students, or is it only that the teacher said, I need to see you because I draw my energy from you. It's very difficult for me to be speaking to a blank screen. Did you speak to children and sometimes did you hear from them, I do not always feel well enough in order to show myself? Did you speak about them? And then again, mobile phones at schools. This is part of our offline world. Safer Internet Forum has a consultative panel. It consists of young people. When we speak to them, very often we hear that there is a problem with phones in schools. So did you have a debate in your schools? Did you talk to children how they want to manage the question of phones in schools? So it's important for me to know to what extent we listen to children. Do we hear their voice? And of course, it is not also possible to say, time is now, you've got 5 minutes, and whatever we decide, we'll put in place. Sometimes it may turn out that a decision we made or a solution we've implemented or introduced will turn out to be a wrong one after 6 months or a year. So we have, as Martyna has said, to be ready to admit that we were in the wrong, that we made a mistake. It also teaches children participation in decision-making processes. And I just wanted to show you a number of examples because we asked children questions. Some few years ago, in 2017, if I remember correctly, Facebook carried out consultations with children and young people on functioning on Facebook. We met with our consultative panel and we didn't have to wait long before we heard some very, very specific advice and proposals. If we have a service that is active 24 hours a day, they want to have a chat function. Response and helpline should be operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then again, if you disclose something, they want to have time to just turn the profile off for a short while, clean it, and then to switch it on again. We forwarded these proposals to Facebook. And let me just mention one more example. They wanted for safety instructions to be presented as videos with more illustrations because they understand images better and quicker, and sometimes they do not understand written statements just as well. And what would be your advice for younger children? That was the question we asked. And as you can see, they had very valuable bits of advice. They said, have some distance to what you're doing. You need distance because if you want to be in social media. So they also advise people to be cautious. And as they are role models for younger children, they have credibility, they are trusted. It's very good to present such advice because adults are very rarely models for young children about things that online. And we had a survey, Our Europe, Our Rights, Our Future. 10,000 respondents took part in this exercise, including ones from Poland. And if we look at children's rights in the digital world, 30% of children in the EU and over 50% of children in Europe, because we studied some non-member states, and over half of children that are disabled come from migrant or ethnic minority background, they felt some form of discrimination. We will hear about girls and the abuse that they face on the internet and discrimination they face during a later presentation. A majority of respondents, young people, said even when they are asked about their opinion, their responses are not taken into account. I also found a very interesting bit of information. Most ideas, plans, and problems are being presented by children when they are 8 or 9, and older children are less inclined to so freely inform us about their preferences. Indeed, as we go older, we become less open, but I think it also comes from experience. Children see that their comments, their suggestions were all in vain, and nobody reacted, nobody did anything about it. And there is also a question of poverty. 1/3 of children have problems with financing all the things that are connected to their education, and they also have problem with access to quality education. And during the pandemic, as we see from research, this bad economic situation impacted very much on children's mental condition, but also on their access to education, to technologies, to appliances. So actually this gap has grown bigger. So instead of equalizing social opportunities, we have this digital divide which is becoming greater and greater. So digitalization will actually strengthen the consequences of poverty. Children also say that the older we get, the less we feel prepared for the future in school environment. This is something we mentioned many times during the debate. After the pandemic, the situation might change slightly and some potential will be appreciated. Children do not feel safe as regards to support they get from grown-ups when they are being abused.
As for digital challenges, one of the most frequently cited problems is a lack of connectivity. And in Romania, 1/3 of children could not benefit from distance learning because of lack of connectivity, which shows you the scale of a problem. The positive news is that almost 80% declare that their parents see their rights, appreciate their rights, want to mainstream them in the decision-making process, whereas among teachers it would be 61%. And as for the society at large, only 25% of children say that the outside world would like to implement their rights for good. A very curious, very interesting and beneficial initiative of the Council of Europe is the Friendly Children's Strategy to speak to children about their rights in a digital environment and in digital world. And this is crucially important given that it is extremely difficult to navigate children across various legal documents, and the whole leaflet to be distributed among children contains 5 bullets. Children change from the first to the 18th year of age, so you have different rights as you mature and grow up. Children should not be treated any different without legitimate reason. So children with disabilities should be treated on a par unless, for instance, they have impaired motion and need a different entrance. Children must feel that one is listening to them and that they are taken seriously. Government should encourage children to have to start cooperation and in decision-making children should be also taken into account, especially as regards issues that are directly concerned with children. And here, this is a material that we have sent out to schools, summarizing the points identified by the Council of Europe's leaflet. And we asked children whether they understand this leaflet correctly and what is missing, what has been overlooked. So, your right to active participation in decision-making processes. And many children or even teenagers say, I don't understand. What do you mean? How should I be part of decision-making processes? There was one opinion that was very interesting, that the girl at home feels empowered, that she is consulted with. She knows that she's a child, that she is subordinated to parents, but she said that I don't like how adults treat young people. At school, we are not allowed to speak our minds freely, and we are scared of being rebuffed by teachers. So this is a problem. And another answer, we should be consulted, but nobody asks what we think. The right to technology to be enjoyed by all children. All children said that at school they would like to have mobiles and access to technologies. That school should give them access to technologies. It is so important for them to have this digital technology with them at schools. And of course, the access to technologies should be different depending on the age of children. And also, they thought that state should co-finance access or connectivity for poorer families. And the right to be informed. Yes, this is true. This is absolutely a right vested in children and young people. And how do they understand it? Well, I understand it that we should or we have to be informed about important things that are going on. So we have a right to demand reliable information. It is very important for them to have reliable, solid information. Nowadays, in the era of fake news, children would like to have trustworthy information. Your right to accede to groups, so they want to enter a group or form a group, and very often they say you should not be followed by the government unless this is about some specific situation. So they are aware of being tracked. Your right to play online, well, it's just a normal use of the internet. So internet equals entertainment, and states and governments should support value for money, but informative and good entertainment. The right to education, yes, I have to go to schools, so I will go to school. But children say that they should really be able to afford extracurricular activities and have access to quality education, and also free of charge public education that is also upheld by the European Union. The right to protection against any harm or abuse. And one takes care of fending off physical violence at schools, but forgetting about psychological violence, bullying. What is very important in European strategy for a better internet for children is development competence, fighting illegal context and detrimental context, the chief recommendations. Would you please download it and look at it, because the findings are so interesting. Equality, inclusive approach, equal treatment of children, equal access, consultation, availability of psychological assistance. These are the most important takeaways. And also designing structures that will support inclusiveness, including of children in decision-making processes. This should be really somehow practiced in every school, that every important school decision should be consulted with children. 20% of children consulted should be representing marginalized groups and minority groups. Technological companies should be monitored, but member states should also try to enhance those companies that protect children against sexual abuse. Apple has now this option of the filter sieving out all the discriminatory material. So to what extent we want those large technological giants to be involved? Because sometimes we expect of them to do things, but when they start doing things, they are blamed on trespassing on our privacy. So I encourage you to promote this survey, Digital Decade for Youth survey, and this is the starting point for the European strategy, especially in digital environment, the strategy for safety. I'm sorry for talking so much and so fast, but I had a number of issues to squeeze into 20 minutes slot.
Anna, thank you so much. I believe it is so important to take children's perspective into account. We have a youth panel, so we've been doing this for many years. There were many questions from the participants and also in the comments about cameras. Are they to be on or off? But let me ask you, because we've been working online for quite a long time, do you see this a problem also for adults? Some people are not willing or more willing to have the cameras on. Yes, indeed, it's true. It is important to have social consent for a certain solution. So, for example, if you want to see one another, if we want to talk, if we need this contact with other people without the camera on, you do not feel the emotions, the energy. And if we need that, we should communicate this during the meeting. And we should say, hey, what do you think? Should we have this meeting with all cameras on? But sometimes there are problems also connected to technology. Sometimes the bandwidth is not good enough. The internet connection is not good enough. And children feel obliged to turn the camera on. And sometimes we have mess in our room. Our virtual background is not on. Children are running behind us. So sometimes we're not willing to show ourselves during meetings, but it's important to talk about this, because sometimes we need to see other people, at least maybe sometimes for a while, or when they speak, or at the beginning we should see one another. There is a question about one more word, and again, sometimes when we hear about inclusiveness so much, we no longer understand it. Of course, it comes from English. It doesn't really translate into Polish. Włączanie, inclusiveness. So that's the So we should maybe say włączający in Polish instead of inclusive, because it is more understandable. It means that everyone should try to be together, give everyone the same opportunities, the same potential, the same chances. We should not exclude people, because we may turn out to be traveling alone, leaving those who are less vulnerable behind, either because they cannot access for the reason of their ability, or they cannot afford a ticket, or they simply, for different reasons, are not able to embark on a train that's moving towards the future. So this is particularly important for children, because children have no other way to counteract this or to remedy the situation. So they need our help. We have to be very, very careful, very mindful at schools, at homes, and also as part of public administration. Sometimes when we have something, when we enjoy something, we think it's obvious and everyone has the same opportunities. And unfortunately, it is not always true. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that it would be fantastic if you were to react to certain things that are new, that surprise you. You should maybe talk to your pupils, to your students about this. Look, I've attended this conference and I heard about this or that. What's your opinion about it?